Winter is when smart Ironman triathletes build the bike fitness that pays off next season. It's not about endless slow rides in poor weather, it's about building the engine and improving your ability to ride in your aero position indoors. And today we'll dig into how to train smarter on the bike this winter. I'm Coach Rob Bilby from Team Oxygen Addict. Let's get to it. If you're preparing for your first Ironman or 70.3 and you're not really sure how to train, we can definitely help you. Here at Team Oxygen Addict, we specialise in coaching athletes who have busy working lives and family commitments. There's a link below in the description to book a membership call. What's the real difference between structured indoor bike sessions and just riding on Zwift or group rides outdoors? And when should I use each one of them during winter? If you're limited in time, spend your time training in the most structured way that's going to give you the biggest return on investment of the training time that you put in. And structured indoor bike training sessions are going to give you a faster increase in your fitness than just riding, whether that's just riding indoors or just riding outdoors. The structure of that, having specific interval training at specific intensities and be really clear what changes in your fitness you want to affect here. That's the best way to get the fastest improvement in your bike fitness and in fact your overall fitness for Ironman and 70.3 next year. That's not to say there isn't value in just riding on Zwift or just going out for a group ride or going for a ride with your friends. But the aim of doing those rides, it isn't the same as the specific aerobic fitness improvement you're going to be getting from an interval session on something like Zwift or Rouvy. The bottom line here is, assuming that you're motivated to make changes in your fitness for next season, the best way to go about that is going to be with 2 structured interval sessions a week and 1 longer unstructured aerobic ride every week. You have to tailor this training to suit both you and your goals, but also the mentality that you have. If you're at the phase right now where you would rather just be riding with friends outside and you're willing to sacrifice some of the gains you would get by training specifically, that's absolutely fine. And if you're really focused on performance gains for next season, it might be that you have to sacrifice some of the social time with friends in order to apply yourself a little bit more to the structured training, so you're going to get a bit more of those returns, if you like. If you can balance those out, great. 2 indoor sessions a week. They'll be done really quickly. If you've got a place you can leave your bike set up on the trainer indoors, a 1-hour bike session can take you 1 hour and 5 minutes. If you leave your kit ready to go, it often takes a lot longer than that to get ready to go for a ride outdoors. How can I increase the amount of time that I can comfortably hold my aero position during my winter trainer rides? Treat it as interval training for your body's ability to hold a new position. As you're lower at the front, as you're bent over more, as your elbows are more tucked in, it is going to feel significantly different. And you've got to expect it to not feel as comfortable at first as riding in your standard sitting up on the hoods position would be on the bike. And it's going to take some time to adjust to that. And I think you have to accept that. Usually we find it somewhere in the region of 4 to 6 weeks to go from being really comfortable riding on a road bike position to being really comfortable riding in a dedicated TT position. It's likely you're going to be able to put out less power when you're in your aero position. So bear that in mind. If you've done an FTP test in a road bike position, if you try and hold those numbers in an aero position for the first time, the chances are you're not going to be able to put out as much power as easily. So 2 things I think you need to do. You need to spend a few sessions doing that interval training for your body's position. So spend a few minutes in the aero position, spend a few minutes sitting up. It's best to do that before you actually get into the real main block of your winter interval training, because you want to be doing as much of your interval training as you can in your aero position. So you need to be relatively well adapted to that at the time. Now, for those of you with a multiple season fitness already, you'll probably find you can go into your interval training and treat it as whatever the length of the interval is, say it's 4 or 5 or 6 minutes, do that period of time down in the aero bars and then sit up on the hoods for your recovery and get back into the aero bars to work hard and train your body that way to get used to being in that position. And again, initially over winter, you'll find the focus can be just on having the position with your elbows on the pads and your hands out on the extensions. You can look straight down at the floor when you're training indoors without any kind of penalty. Obviously, as you get closer to the end of winter and you get toward the point when you're going to be riding outdoors in the aero position, you have to learn to go from this head down position to lifting your neck up so you can actually see down the road where you're going to be going. And my experience is it takes probably another 2 to 4 weeks to get muscles in your neck and your shoulders used to holding that position outdoors, both as a function of you have to be looking up the road so your neck is more extended, but also indoors on the trainer, everything's really smooth. Outdoors, when you're going over different road surfaces and potholes, that's part of it as well. So it's really usual to come back from your first few outdoor aero position rides with quite a sore neck. And for those of you racing, in fact, either 70.3 or Ironman, it's a long period of time to hold that position for. So you're going to have to expect to spend some time getting into that aero position. Bottom line being, the more time you can train in the aero position during the winter, the more adapted you're going to be to it, the more accurate your numbers are going to be training in that position. And then as you transition to ride outdoors, the easier it's going to be to make that transition at the end of winter to comfortably hold your aero position. And if I can make recommendation to people, if you're considering getting a time trial bike or considering getting aero bars on your road bike, do it now. Do it as soon as you can. Start using that position indoors and get used to it, because you will then become conditioned in that position. I'm looking to upgrade my bike components. What should I focus on first? Should it be group set? Should it be wheels? Should it be tires? Handlebars? I'm a little bit lost. So if you are looking to spend some money to make yourself go faster next year, the things you need to think about in order are time trial bars, if you don't already have those on your road bike and you don't want to swap over to a full TT bike. They'd be the first thing I would go to. The speed gains you're going to have by learning to ride in the aero position are going to outweigh any other money that you're going to spend, apart from perhaps a skin suit and aero helmet. Next upgrade I would go with is tires, is to get yourself a really decent set of racing tires, and obviously save them for the end of winter. Don't put them on until you get well into spring when the weather's nice. Again, if we're talking in terms of numbers here, going from gator skin type winter tires to decent race tires, you're probably looking at a gain of about 12 watts per wheel. So it's the equivalent of adding 25 watts onto your FTP in terms of the reduction of rolling resistance. So it's a massive, massive amount of free speed for the, I don't know, let's say under £100 you spend on a couple of decent new race tires. So that's really worth considering. The next thing to think about is a really good set of aero race wheels in somewhere in the 40 to 60 millimeter range, a pair of carbon deep section wheels. Again, that's going to be free speed essentially once you've paid for the wheels. So they're not free, but it is immediate extra speed. You're probably looking at a gain in speed outdoors of 1 to 2 kilometers an hour by putting deep section aero wheels on. Go with the race tires first and then go with race wheels in that order. If you can go with the pair of the upgrade, you're going to see a big increase in speed. So that's how I would focus. I don't see spending the money on the components to be a great way to go any faster. It's nice to have, but honestly, I think the way to go is if you can look to spend that money and consolidate it into a whole new bike that already comes with electronic shifting, deep section wheels and decent race tires on, all those wins come at once. And honestly, again, as a guy who didn't have a lot of money earlier on in my racing career and tried to cut corners and buy things cheaply when they were on sale, you end up getting a much better deal if you just buy a Black Friday deal on one of last season's bikes that comes with all of these things on already, if you've got the money to do that. For structured winter turbo sessions, should I ride in erg mode or stay in the manual resistance mode? So for those of you who don't know what erg mode is, it's a way that regardless of how fast or slow you pedal, the smart trainer will shift the resistance to make sure you're putting out the same amount of power. So the way that this is useful is if you're doing hard interval sessions, you can flick erg mode on. And if you start to get tired and if your cadence stops to drop because you're getting tired, effectively, the trainer will increase resistance to mean you're still putting out the same power output. If you're riding in manual mode and you start to get tired and your cadence starts to drop, just like outdoors, you'll gradually start to put out less and less power. The drawback, the reason I'm such a big fan of saying ride in manual mode is my friend Matt Bottrell's got a great phrase. He says, power is nothing without control. And you need to learn to control the power. I think it's okay perhaps to use erg mode in the early days of training or the early weeks of the winter when you're kind of just getting yourself back into that structured training. But it's really important for you to learn how controlling the power feels, the effect that going a few revolutions a minute faster or slower has on the power you're putting out, because it'll make a surprising amount of difference. I think it's a really, really good way to go that you learn to control the power and be in charge of how hard you're pushing and therefore how much power you put out, rather than it being controlled by a computer and you closing your eyes and just riding. That way, you've got a lot more control over your cadence, and you'll also learn a bit more about the cadence that you feel natural at, if you like. I think the danger with erg mode is as you start to tire, your cadence starts to drop. So the resistance increases. So your cadence perhaps drops more. And you end up in a kind of a spiral of death where the cadence ends up really, really slow. And that's not the ideal way for you to be training. I'd rather you be in control of your own cadence and the amount of power that you're putting out. My FTP's dropped on this month's baseline test at the start of my winter block. Does that mean I've lost fitness, and is that normal? Obviously, this isn't going to be relevant to you if this is your first step into structured training. But I always recommend doing a baseline FTP test at the start of your interval training. The reason is we want your numbers to be accurate to the fitness you have now. And it can be really hard if you've done multiple seasons, because it's likely that your FTP is not as high as it was at peak fitness in the season, especially if you've just had an off season. It's likely your numbers will be lower. I work on the baseline that your baseline test should come out at about 10% lower than your previous season's all-time high. Doesn't necessarily mean you've lost fitness per se. You're not a worse athlete. It's just you're less conditioned. It'll come back relatively quickly. But if you're trying to train at the numbers that you trained at during the summer, the chances are you're trying to push a bit too hard. And if I'm correct in that most athletes' numbers are about 10% down on their season's best at the start of a block, we absolutely don't want you training 10% higher than you should be, because you're not going to get fitter any faster. All you're going to do is turn yourself inside out in the sessions. You're going to be getting less return on your training investment because you're going to be much more tired after the session. There's no more fitness gain at 110% of your FTP than at 100. You're just much more fatigued, and it takes you longer to recover from that session. It doesn't affect your FTP anymore. I'd in fact rather you train just under your FTP number than just above it. So be conservative. So in answer to this question, it's not a problem that your number is down on where it was. It is normal. It will come back relatively quickly. And I expect that at the test at the end of this first 8-week block, the numbers will be at least back to where they were and possibly even higher than before. So keep the faith. Everything's going to be fine. I hope this video has helped you. In the comments below, I'd love to hear about your experiences of winter bike training, what's worked for you in the past, what hasn't. Link in the show notes down below if you're interested in finding out more about coaching with us.